What happens when the fairy tale shatters in front of the entire world? On the night of his 35th birthday, tech billionaire Julian Croft hosted the party of the year. The guest list was a who's who of New York's elite. But while Julian, the golden boy of AI, toasted to his success, his pregnant wife Amelia stood on the sidelines, invisible to the man who was her entire world. He didn't just forget her, he erased her. But one guest with a camera saw everything. By the next morning, Julian's perfect life was a dumpster fire, and Amelia was the most famous woman on the planet. This is the story of how one night of public humiliation led to a global reckoning. The silence in their Fifth Avenue penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the sterile, air-conditioned quiet and exhaled the scent of expensive, untouched lilies. Amelia Hayes. 7 months pregnant and feeling every bit of the weight traced the rim of a porcelain teacup. Her reflection warped and distant in the silver tray beside it. Outside, the sounds of Manhattan were a muted symphony, a frantic, energetic score for a life she felt increasingly disconnected from. Her life wasn't here in the heart of the city. It was contained within the 10,000 square feet of glass and steel that Julian Croft, her husband, called home. Their story had once been the kind of modern romance magazines swooned over. Amelia, a brilliant and passionate art historian from a comfortable but by no means wealthy Boston family, had met Julian at a charity gala. He wasn't the titan of the tech world, then just a fiercely intelligent and charmingly relentless founder of a fledgling AI startup called Nexus AI. He'd pursued her with a single-minded focus that she found both dizzying and irresistible. He'd loved her mind. He'd said the way she could find the soul in a brushstroke, the history in a piece of clay. He'd made her feel seen. Now, 4 years later, Julian was a titan. Nexus AI was a unicorn, a behemoth valued in the tens of billions, and Julian Croft was its king. His face was on the cover of Forbes and wired his name a synonym for innovation. But the man who once looked at her like she was a masterpiece now looked straight through her. His gaze fixed on a horizon she couldn't see, one populated by stock tickers, server farms, and the endless hungry pursuit of more. Amelia placed a hand on the gentle swell of her belly, where their son was kicking softly. This baby was supposed to be their anchor, the project that brought Julian back from the stratosphere of his success. When she'd told him she was pregnant, he had been momentarily ecstatic. He'd held her, his eyes bright with a flicker of the old Julian. "A son," he'd whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "An heir." The word had landed with a thud in the quiet of their bedroom, a cold, transactional term that had more to do with legacy and dynasty than with love and family. The excitement had faded quickly, replaced by the all-consuming pressure of a new product launch. Project Chimera, he called it. It was revolutionary. He promised an AI that could predict market trends with 99% accuracy. It would change the world. It would also change him, hollowing him out until all that was left was the CEO. His days were a blur of meetings, calls with Tokyo and London, and strategy sessions that bled late into the night. He would come home, his eyes glowing with the blue light of his phone, kiss her forehead absently, and murmur something about changing the world before disappearing into his home office until dawn. Tonight was his 35th birthday party. It was not, of course, a simple celebration. It was a networking event, a power play, a carefully orchestrated performance with a guest list curated by 3 different PR firms. Senators would be there rubbing shoulders with movie stars. Rival tech CEOs would be sizing each other up over champagne that cost more than her first car. It was, in Julian's words, a critical confluence of influence. Amelia had tried to suggest something smaller. Just us, she'd said a month ago, her hand on his arm. Maybe a weekend away. We could go back to that little inn in Vermont where you proposed. Julian had patted her hand without looking up from his tablet. This is better, honey. It's important. Everyone who's anyone will be here. It's for us, for the family. The family. It felt like another one of his brands, a subsidiary of Julian Croft, Inc. She had spent the afternoon with the stylist Julian's assistant had hired. A severe woman with a measuring tape and a critical eye had paraded a dozen designer gowns before her. They were all beautiful, all obscenely expensive, and all designed to elegantly conceal her pregnancy as if it were a flaw to be hidden. She finally chose a deep sapphire silk gown by Valentino. It was graceful and flowed over her body, but it felt like a costume. Her best friend, Chloe, had called while the stylist was pinning the hem. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Chloe had asked, her voice laced with the protective skepticism she always reserved for Julian. Chloe was a journalist, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who saw the world in headlines and deadlines, and she'd never been fully sold on the Julian Croft fairy tale. "I have to be," Amelia had replied, trying to sound more cheerful than she felt. "It's his big night. It's his birthday, Amelia, not a coronation. Don't let him treat you like part of the scenery." Now, standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the city lights a glittering carpet at her feet. Amelia felt exactly like part of the scenery. The penthouse, which she had once painstakingly decorated with warm colors, personal art, and comfortable furniture, had been slowly transformed by Julian's team. Her favorite paintings were replaced with bold, abstract modern art that was a better investment. The cozy armchair where she loved to read was now a stark, angular leather chaise that was aesthetically pleasing but impossible to relax in. It was a show home, a gilded cage. The door to the master suite opened, and Julian strode out. He was already in his tuxedo, a custom Tom Ford creation that fit him like a second skin. He looked like the man on the magazine covers, powerful, handsome, radiating an almost electric aura of confidence. He was checking his watch, a Patek Philippe that had been a gift from a Saudi prince. "Traffic is already backing up on 5th, he said, his voice clipped and efficient. "The first wave of guests will be here in 20 minutes. Is the catering team all set?" "Yes," Amelia said softly. "Everything's under control." He finally looked at her, his eyes doing a quick evaluative scan. "Good. You look good. The dress works." He didn't say she looked beautiful. He didn't cross the room to kiss her. He just nodded, a CEO approving an asset. His gaze flickered down to her belly. Is he settled?" "We don't want any drama tonight." The question was so callous, so clinical it stole her breath. "He's a baby, Julian, not a potential PR crisis." Julian sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You know what I mean, Amelia. Tonight has to be perfect. Ben Carter is closing the deal with the Japanese investors tonight. I need everyone to see stability, strength, a perfect partnership." He gestured vaguely between them. "Us." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He snatched it from the marble countertop. His entire demeanor shifted. A broad, genuine smile spread across his face, a smile she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "Zara, you're downstairs." "Fantastic." No, don't wait in line. I'll have security bring you right up." He typed furiously, his thumbs a blur. Zara Vance. The name sent a familiar chill through Amelia. Zara was the founder of Elysian, a lifestyle and branding empire built on social media. She was beautiful, sharp, and single. Julian had been spending an increasing amount of time with her, citing a strategic brand alignment. He spoke of her with an energetic admiration that was once reserved for Amelia. "Is she a surprise guest?" Amelia asked, trying to keep her voice even. "She's the keynote," Julian said distractedly. "We're announcing the Nexus Elysian partnership tonight. It's going to be massive." He looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, as if she were interrupting something far more important. "I've got to go down and greet the first arrivals. Try to mingle. And smile, Amelia, please. Everyone's watching." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the cavernous room. The silence rushed back in colder and heavier than before. Everyone's watching. But the only person she wanted to see, her truly see her, had already looked away. She took a deep, shuddering breath, placed both hands on her stomach, and felt the steady, reassuring kick of her son. Tonight, she wasn't just Amelia Hayes, wife of a billionaire. She was a mother. And for the first time, she wondered if that was a role she would have to play alone. The party was less a celebration and more a weather system. It had its own atmosphere, its own pressure, a swirling vortex of power, money, and ambition that sucked the air out of the room. The penthouse, which had felt cavernous and empty just an hour ago, was now a crush of bodies draped in couture and dripping with jewels. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and ludicrously small appetizers. The low thrum of electronic music pulsed beneath a cacophony of laughter and conversation. It was a perfectly engineered spectacle, and at its center, holding court, was Julian. Amelia watched him from across the room, a fixed, pleasant smile on her face, the one she had practiced in the mirror. He was magnificent in his element. He moved with the easy grace of a man who knew he was the most important person in any room he entered. He clapped a senator on the back, shared a laugh with a famous actress, and leaned in to listen intently to a wizened old banker, making each of them feel for a moment like the center of his universe. It was a performance, and he was a master. She tried to do as he'd asked. She tried to mingle. She found herself in a conversation with the wife of a hedge fund manager, a woman with a face so tight with Botox it seemed painful to smile. They talked about summering in the Hamptons and the trouble with finding good help subjects so alien to Amelia's own life that she felt like she was reading from a script. She nodded and smiled, her hand resting protectively on her belly, a gesture that felt like anchoring herself in a storm. She saw Ben Carter, Julian's business partner, and ostensibly their friend. Ben was a grounding force at Nexus AI, the practical engineer to Julian's visionary showman. He caught her eye from across the room and gave her a small, sympathetic smile. He started to move toward her, but was intercepted by a venture capitalist with predatory eyes. Amelia's gaze drifted back to her husband, and that's when she saw her. Zara Vance. She wasn't hard to spot. In a room of beautiful people, Zara was a supernova. She was wearing a liquid gold dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. Her hair was a cascade of dark, glossy waves, and her laugh, sharp and loud, cut through the din. She was standing next to Julian, her hand resting on his forearm, in a gesture of casual intimacy that made Amelia's stomach clench. Julian was beaming his entire body, angled towards Zara. He was laughing not his polite public laugh, but a deep, genuine belly laugh, the kind Amelia hadn't heard from him in years. They were a matched set, two gleaming, polished predators at the top of their game. They looked, Amelia thought, with a pang of cold clarity, perfect together. No one was looking at Amelia. She was a ghost at the feast, her pregnancy rendering her an awkward matronly footnote in the dazzling narrative being written by her husband and this other woman. A waiter offered her a glass of champagne, then saw her belly and stammered an apology, quickly replacing it with a glass of water. It was a small thing, but it felt like another reminder of her otherness, her exclusion from the glittering alcohol-fueled world Julian now inhabited. She decided to try. She had to try. For the baby. For the memory of the man she had married. Taking a deep breath, she began to navigate the sea of people murmuring, "Excuse me," as she squeezed past backs draped in silk and velvet. She finally reached the circle where Julian and Zara held court. "And that's when I told him," Zara was saying, her voice rich with amusement, "if your algorithm can't even predict what shoes I want to buy, how can it predict the Nikkei?" The whole room burst into laughter. Julian's laugh was the loudest. He saw Amelia then, standing at the edge of the circle. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before being replaced by his smooth public mask. "Amelia," he said, his tone just a little too loud, a little too forced. "There you are." He didn't introduce her to the group. He didn't put his arm around her. He just acknowledged her presence. A box ticked. Zara Vance turned her head slowly, her dark eyes sweeping over Amelia from head to toe. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Amelia's stomach, before a cool, polite smile touched her lips. "Amelia," she said, her voice like honey and ice. "Julian has told me so much about you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Zara," Amelia said, her own voice sounding thin and reedy to her ears. "Congratulations on the partnership." "Oh, we're just getting started," Zara said, turning her attention back to Julian, effectively dismissing Amelia. "Jay, you have to tell them about the data integration plan. It's genius." "Jay." She called him Jay. Amelia stood there for another moment, frozen as the conversation flowed around her, leaving her on a silent island. Julian was already lost again. His eyes sparkling as he spoke about Project Chimera, using jargon and acronyms that were designed to impress and exclude. He didn't look at her again. She was invisible. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She backed away slowly, the smile still plastered on her face, until she was swallowed by the crowd once more. She found a quiet corner near the windows, her back to the party, and stared out at the indifferent lights of the city. The baby kicked a sharp, insistent jab, as if he too could feel his mother's distress. Later the speeches began. A stage had been set up at one end of the grand living space. Ben Carter went first, giving a warm, if slightly reserved, speech about Julian's vision and drive. Then Julian took the stage, and the room fell silent. He was a magnetic speaker. He talked about the future, about changing the world, about the power of technology to solve humanity's greatest problems. He was charming, funny, and inspiring. Amelia felt a pang of the old pride, the awe she used to feel watching him dream. "But vision is nothing without execution," Julian said, his voice resonating through the speakers. "And innovation is a team sport. That's why I am so incredibly thrilled to announce our new strategic partnership with Elysian and its brilliant founder. A woman whose vision is as sharp and transformative as her brand. Please welcome to the stage Zara Vance." The applause was thunderous. Zara glided onto the stage, accepting a kiss on the cheek from Julian. They stood side by side, bathed in the spotlight, a power couple in every sense of the word. And finally, Julian said, raising his glass of champagne, I want to propose a toast to the future, to new beginnings, to partnerships that will redefine the landscape of our world, to Nexus Elysian. To Nexus Elysian, the crowd roared back. He never mentioned her. He never mentioned their baby on his 35th birthday in their home, surrounded by their friends. He toasted to a future that didn't seem to include her at all. He didn't just ignore her. He had publicly, emphatically erased her. The final sharpest cut came moments later. As the music swelled and the party resumed its fever pitch, Amelia saw him by the bar. She had to say something. She had to know. She walked over to him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Julian, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He turned a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes bright and unfocused. Amelia, great party, right? The investors are ecstatic. Julian, your toast. She began, the words catching in her throat. He waved a dismissive hand. It's business, honey. You wouldn't understand. I understand that you didn't mention me. Or your son. His face hardened. The charming mask dropped, revealing the cold, ruthless stranger beneath. Not now, Amelia. He hissed, his voice low and dangerous. For God's sake, don't make a scene. This is the most important night of my career. Go find a seat. Go talk to someone's wife. Just don't do this. He turned his back on her, leaving her standing there as if she had been slapped. The music pulsed. The laughter swirled around her. But all Amelia could hear was the shattering of her own heart. And in that moment, she knew. It was over. The fairy tale was dead. Chloe was right. She wasn't just scenery. She was a liability. A problem to be managed. And she would not be managed. Not anymore. Without another word, she turned and walked not to a quiet corner but towards the door. Leaving the party was like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. The cool air of the hallway was a gasp of reality, a shock to her system after the suffocating, perfumed atmosphere of the penthouse. No one noticed her go. The private elevator descended in silence, its mirrored walls reflecting a woman she barely recognized, a pale, haunted face above a sapphire dress. Her hands protectively cradling a life that felt like the only real thing left in her world. The doorman, a kind-faced man named George, who always had a smile for her, looked surprised to see her leaving alone. Mrs. Croft, is everything all right? Should I get the car for you? The thought of being driven by Julian's driver in Julian's car back to their cold, empty bed was unbearable. No, thank you, George, she said, managing a weak smile. I just need some air. I'll get a cab. She stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The city, which had looked so alien and indifferent from the penthouse window, now felt like a refuge. The stream of yellow came, the distant wail of a siren, the anonymous faces of people walking by it, was all blessedly beautifully real. It wasn't curated. It wasn't a performance. She hailed a taxi, the simple, ordinary act, feeling like a declaration of independence. She got in, the worn leather of the seat, a comfort. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she was blank. Where could she go? Not to Chloe's. Her friend would immediately go on the warpath, and Amelia didn't have the strength for a fight, not even one on her behalf. Not to her parents in Boston. The late-night call and sudden arrival would cause a panic she couldn't bear to inflict. She needed anonymity. She needed a place to disappear. The Greenwich Hotel. She said the name coming to her from a forgotten travel article. It was downtown, far from their Upper East Side bubble, known for its privacy and understated luxury. A place where people went to be left alone. During the ride, she didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She watched the city lights blur past the window, each one a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. The glittering storefronts, the grand theaters, the endless stream of people chasing their own dreams. Julian was one of them. He was chasing his so hard and so fast that he had left her and their son behind in his wake. She thought of his words. "Not now, Amelia. Don't make a scene." He hadn't been worried about her feelings. He had been worried about his image, about the investors, about the deal. She wasn't his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. She was an unpredictable variable in a complex equation, a potential disruption to a flawless business plan. The realization didn't hurt as much as it clarified. It was like a splash of ice water, shocking but sobering. The man she married, the man who loved her for her mind and her soul, was gone. He hadn't just changed. He had been entirely replaced by the CEO, the brand, the icon. At the hotel, she paid with a personal credit card. Julian didn't know she had one she'd kept from her old life. She checked in under her maiden name, Hayes. The quiet professionalism of the staff was a balm. No one recognized her. No one fawned over her. She was just a woman alone, checking into a hotel late at night. The anonymity was a relief so profound, it almost made her dizzy. Her room was beautiful, decorated with warm woods, aged leather, and soft, welcoming textiles. It was the antithesis of her penthouse. It felt like a home, not a showroom. There was a fireplace, a comfortable armchair, and a bookshelf filled with actual books, not just props. The first thing she did was take off the sapphire Valentino gown. It felt like shedding a skin. She let it fall into a silk puddle on the floor. She removed the diamond earrings and the necklace Julian had given her for their anniversary, the ones his assistant had picked out. She stood in her simple slip, feeling lighter, freer. Then she took out her phone. It was buzzing with notifications. Missed calls from Ben Carter. A dozen texts from the party planner. She scrolled through them, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with a decisive click, she powered it down. The silence that followed was absolute. She was disconnected. She was unreachable. She was for the first time in a long time free. She ran a bath, pouring in the scented oils the hotel provided. As she sank into the hot water, the tension in her body began to dissolve. The cold stone of pain in her chest began to thaw, and finally the tears came. They weren't loud, desperate sobs, but quiet, steady tears that streamed down her face and into the water. She cried for the man she had lost, for the love she thought would last a lifetime. She cried for the naive girl who had believed in the fairy tale. And she cried for the baby inside her, this innocent life who would be born into a broken home. She lay in the tub for over an hour until the water grew cool. As she dried herself with a thick, soft towel, she looked at her reflection in the steamy mirror. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her gaze was clear. The humiliation was gone, burned away by the quiet anger that had taken its place. She wouldn't go back. She couldn't. She couldn't raise a child in that environment, a place where love was conditional, where worth was measured in stock prices and public opinion. She didn't want her son to grow up thinking his father's attention was something to be earned, a prize to be won. She didn't want him to see his mother shrink and fade until she was nothing more than a ghost in her own home. Her decision settled in her soul with a quiet, unshakable certainty. This wasn't just an escape. It was a rescue mission. She was rescuing herself, and she was rescuing her son. She slipped into the hotel's plush bathrobe, curled up in the large armchair by the window, and pulled a soft cashmere blanket over her legs. She didn't turn on the television or try to distract herself. She just sat there, watching the sky over the Hudson River slowly begin to lighten the black, turning to a deep, bruised purple. She felt the baby move inside her, a gentle, rhythmic rolling. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, her hands cradling her belly. "And that's going to be enough. I promise." As the sun began to rise over the city, casting a golden glow on the buildings across the river, Amelia Hayes felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had lost her husband, her home, her life of unimaginable luxury. But in this quiet hotel room, as a new day dawned, she had found something she hadn't even realized. She had lost herself. And she had no idea that hundreds of miles away, the world was just beginning to learn her name. Julian Croft woke to the feeling of a jackhammer inside his skull and the sour taste of expensive whiskey in his mouth. Sunlight, sharp and unforgiving, sliced through a gap in the blackout curtains, striking him directly in the eyes. He groaned, rolling over, and burying his face in a pillow that smelled faintly of Amelia's lavender-scented shampoo. The space next to him in the enormous bed was empty and cold. He fumbled for his phone on the bedside table, his head pounding in time with his heartbeat. 7:30 a.m. He had a board meeting at 9. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed, and winced as the room tilted. The party had been a success, a roaring success. The investors from Tokyo had been practically eating out of his hand. Ben had confirmed the deal was signed, and Zara had been spectacular. He frowned. Where was Amelia? Probably in one of the guest rooms, pouting. He felt a flash of irritation. She'd been so needy last night, so emotional. He'd told her how important the night was. Couldn't she have just played her part? He'd deal with it later. He'd buy her a new piece of jewelry or a trip to Paris. That usually worked. He stood up, staggered toward the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face. As he looked at his reflection, bloodshot eyes, stubble shadowing his jaw, his phone began to buzz on the marble countertop. It wasn't a single call, but an incessant, frantic vibration. It buzzed and buzzed, a swarm of angry bees. Annoyed, he picked it up. The screen was a nightmare. 117 missed calls. 342 new text messages. 99+ notifications from every social media and news app he had. His blood ran cold. This wasn't normal. This was a crisis. His first thought was the market. Had something happened overnight in Asia? Did Project Chimera have a bug? He ignored the calls from his mother, from Ben, from his frantic PR chief, and stabbed at the first text message he saw. It was from Ben. "Call me, now! Do not talk to anyone else." Another from his head of PR, a ruthless woman named Cynthia. "Whatever you do, do not leave the building. Do not post anything. Do not even breathe online. We are in DEFCON 1. What the hell was going on? His thumb, shaking slightly, slid to the Twitter icon. He opened the app, and the world fell out from under him. It was the first thing he saw, The #1 trending topic worldwide. Where is Amelia? His heart stopped. Below it, other hashtags trended with terrifying velocity. Julian Croft Nexus AI Zaravance. The look. His hands trembling, he clicked on the top hashtag. The first image that loaded seared itself onto his brain. It was a photograph clearly taken by a guest with a phone, not a professional. The quality was slightly grainy, which only added to its raw, candid power. The photo captured a perfect, damning moment. In the foreground, he and Zara Vance were laughing heads close together, bathed in the golden light of the party. He was looking at her with an expression of pure adoration, his hand touching her arm. They looked vibrant, happy, the picture of a perfect power couple. And there in the background, slightly out of focus but agonizingly clear, was Amelia. She was standing alone, her hand on her pregnant belly. The sapphire of her dress made her stand out from the crowd. Her face, caught in an unguarded moment, was a portrait of heartbreak. She wasn't just sad. She looked utterly lost, a fragile ghost haunting the edges of her own life. The contrast between the radiant joy in the foreground and the profound loneliness in the background was devastating. It was a story told in a single perfect frame. Beneath the photo, the comments were a tidal wave of fury. This picture is worth 1,000 words, and all of them are scumbag. He's laughing with an Instagram model, while his pregnant wife looks like her world is ending. The definition of trash. I've seen the look on her face before. It's the look of a woman who just realized she's completely alone. That's not just a picture, that's evidence. Where is Amelia? He scrolled frantically. It was everywhere. It had been picked up by Page 6 TMZ, the Daily Mail. But it wasn't just the gossip rags. The New York Times had a story on their website's front page. Nexus AI CEO Julian Croft faces online backlash. After viral photo sparks, concern for pregnant wife. Forbes had an article titled Image Problem: How a Birthday Party Became a Multi-Billion-Dollar PR Nightmare for Nexus AI. The photo had a name. The Look. Someone had dubbed it that, and it had stuck. The story was simple, brutal, and universally understood. The powerful, arrogant billionaire, the glamorous, home-wrecking other woman, the forgotten pregnant wife. His phone buzzed again. It was Cynthia. He answered, his mouth dry. "Julian," she said, her voice stripped of all pleasantries. It was the voice of a general in a losing war. "Tell me she is with you. Tell me she is in the next room, and you are both about to release a statement about how this is all a hilarious misunderstanding." I don't know where she is," Julian stammered, the reality crashing down on him. "She must have gone to a guest room last night." He walked out of the bedroom, his bare feet cold on the marble floor. He checked the first guest room. Empty, the bed perfectly made. He checked the second, then the third. All empty. He ran to her walk-in closet. The sapphire dress was gone. So was a suitcase. "Julian, talk to me." Cynthia's voice barked from the phone. "Where is your wife? She's not here," he said, his own voice sounding distant and strange. "Her suitcase is gone. Her dress is gone. She left last night." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. He could hear Cynthia take a long, slow drag from what was undoubtedly her 4th cigarette of the morning. "Okay," she said finally, her voice grim. "So she's not a hostage. She's a ghost. That's worse. Much, much worse. It means she's in control of the narrative, and right now the narrative is that you are a monster who drove his pregnant wife out into the night." The toast! Julian's mind raced back, trying to piece it together. Her face when he'd told her not to make a scene. The toast to Zara. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, God is right, Cynthia said. The board meeting is cancelled. The stock is already down 9% in pre-market trading. The Japanese investors have postponed the final wire transfer, citing concerns about brand stability. Zara Vance's publicist released a statement an hour ago, saying her relationship with you is strictly professional and that she is deeply concerned for Amelia's well-being. She's thrown you under the bus, Julian. Julian sank onto the edge of the unmade bed, the phone pressed hard against his ear. The penthouse, his castle, suddenly felt like a prison. The silence that had been so peaceful just an hour ago was now accusatory, filled with the ghost of Amelia's presence. "What do I do?" he whispered. "You find her." Cynthia said, her voice like flint. "You find your pregnant, heartbroken wife. You get down on your knees and you beg her for forgiveness in the most public way possible. Because right now, Julian, she isn't just your wife. She's the only thing that can save you." He hung up the phone. The jackhammer in his head was gone, replaced by a terrifying, silent dread. He looked around the vast, sunlit room at the expensive art, the stunning views, the symbols of his success. And he realized that in his relentless pursuit of everything, he had lost the one thing that had ever truly mattered. And the entire world was watching him pay the price. Amelia slept for a few hours, a deep, exhausted sleep, in the unfamiliar comfort of the Greenwich Hotel. She woke not to an alarm, but to a profound sense of quiet. For a fleeting moment, she felt disoriented, the peacefulness a stark contrast to the ambient anxiety that had become her baseline. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, not with a jolt of pain, but with the quiet, settled weight of a decision made. She was here. She had left. It was real. She ordered breakfast from room service, simple toast eggs and orange juice, and ate slowly, deliberately. It was the first meal in months she hadn't eaten while watching Julian text under the table or listened to him dictate notes to his AI assistant. It was just her baby kicking gently, and the sounds of the city waking up outside her window. The peace was a fragile bubble. She knew she couldn't stay disconnected forever. Her parents would be worried. Chloe would be losing her mind. She needed to let them know she was safe. With a deep breath, as if preparing for a plunge into icy water, she picked up her phone from the bedside table and powered it on. The digital onslaught was instantaneous and overwhelming. The screen lit up with a furious barrage of notifications, the device vibrating so hard in her hand it felt alive. Hundreds of texts, missed calls, news alerts. Her first feeling was a surge of panic, a deer in the headlights, terror. What had she done? Her private pain was somehow public. Her thumb shook as she opened a text from Chloe, sent only 20 minutes ago. Amelia. Please tell me you're seeing this. The world is on fire. Are you safe? Call me the second you get this. I'm already on my way to you. I have a good idea of where a sane person would go to escape that lunatic. Before she could even process it, another text from Chloe came through. Okay, I just saw page 6. Greenwich Hotel, smart girl, don't move, don't talk to anyone. I'm 10 minutes away. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She navigated to a news site, her eyes widening in disbelief. There it was, the photo. The look. She saw herself as the world now saw her, a tragic figure, a lonely wife, a victim. The sight of her own heartbreak, so raw and exposed for public consumption, made her feel nauseous. This wasn't what she wanted. She hadn't left to start a war. She had left to find peace. But then, as she scrolled, something else began to happen. She read the comments, the tweets, the articles. Yes, there was pity, but there was also a white-hot current of outrage on her behalf. Thousands upon thousands of people, mostly women, were sharing their own stories of being ignored, diminished, and made to feel small. They weren't just defending her. They were identifying with her. Her private humiliation had become a public rallying cry. Every woman knows the look. Standing with Amelia Hayes today, may we all have the courage to walk out of the party. He didn't just ignore his wife. He erased her. We refuse to be erased. A strange feeling bloomed in her chest, pushing aside the fear. It was a flicker of empowerment. She wasn't just a victim in a photo. She was a symbol. The quiet strength that had carried her out of the penthouse last night was being mirrored back at her, magnified 1,000,000 times over. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "It's me!" Chloe's voice called out. Amelia rushed to open it. Chloe swept into the room like a hurricane, her trench coat flying behind her, a large coffee in one hand and a determined look on her face. She dropped her bag, took one look at Amelia, and enveloped her in a fierce hug. "You did it," Chloe whispered into her hair. "You actually did it. I'm so damn proud of you." When she pulled back, her journalist's eyes were scanning Amelia's face, assessing. "Are you okay? Really okay?" "I am now," Amelia said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "But Chloe, all of this," she gestured vaguely towards her phone. "It's insane." "It's a reckoning," Chloe said, her voice grim but satisfied. Julian built his empire on a carefully constructed image of being the brilliant, benevolent visionary. That one photo shattered the entire facade. It revealed the man behind the brand, and people hate him for it. She took a sip of her coffee. "So what's the plan, because you can't hide in this hotel forever? He's going to find you." "I know," Amelia said, her resolve hardening. "I'm not going back, Chloe. Not ever." "Good," Chloe said, nodding. "That's phase 1. Phase 2 is protecting yourself and your son. You're not just Amelia Hayes, art historian, anymore. You're Amelia Hayes, the woman who took on a billionaire. He's going to fight dirty. He's going to try and control the narrative, paint you as unstable, emotional, vindictive. We need to get ahead of it." Chloe was already scrolling through her phone. "I know people. The best people. You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, you need a shark. Someone who's not afraid of Julian's army of corporate thugs." Her fingers tapped furiously. "Catherine Cat Rinaldi. She's the best divorce attorney in New York. She eats men like Julian for breakfast. I'm calling her office now." As Chloe paced the room, speaking in low, urgent tones to the law firm, Amelia walked to the window. The world outside didn't look so scary anymore. She had a friend. She had a plan. And she had the unexpected, overwhelming support of a global audience. Julian had underestimated her. He had seen her as an accessory, a part of the scenery. He never imagined she could become the main event. The war room inside the Fifth Avenue penthouse was operating at a fever pitch. The air was thick with the smell of stress and stale coffee. Cynthia, the PR chief, stood before a massive screen, displaying a terrifying graph of Nexus AI's plummeting stock price. 2 lawyers from the company's top firm sat at the glass dining table, surrounded by laptops and legal pads. Julian, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, paced the length of the room like a caged animal. He hadn't slept. His mind was a chaotic whirlwind of fury, fear, and a bewildering sense of disbelief. How had this happened? How had one stupid picture undone years of meticulous brand building? "The narrative is cementing," Cynthia said, pointing a remote at the screen. A collage of headlines appeared. He chose his side piece over his pregnant wife. Silicon Valley's rotten core. Is Julian Croft the most hated man in America? Zara Vance is not my side piece, Julian roared, slamming his hand on the table. It was a business partnership. The public doesn't care about the truth, Julian. They care about the story. Cynthia shot back, her usual icy composure cracking. And the story is that you're a heartless monster. Zara's team has already fed a story to Vanity Fair about how she was uncomfortable with your overly familiar behavior, but felt professionally trapped. She's painting herself as another one of your victims. The ungrateful, Julian began, but was cut off by one of the lawyers, a severe man named Marcus Thorne. Our focus cannot be on Zara Vance, Marcus said calmly. Our focus must be on your wife. We need a joint statement, a photo of the two of you smiling, a story about a simple misunderstanding the pressures of a high-stakes life. We need to show a united front. How can I show a united front when I don't know where she is? Julian yelled, his voice raw with desperation. He turned to his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Ari. Anything. We're tracking the cab she took, Ari said, his eyes fixed on a tablet. We have a partial plate. We're running it through our contacts at the TLC. We're also flagging all activity on her known credit cards. Nothing yet. The private elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal Ben Carter. His face was etched with exhaustion and profound disappointment. He walked past the lawyers and the PR team and stood directly in front of Julian. I tried calling you all night, Ben said, his voice low and heavy. I was busy, Julian snapped. I was putting out the fire you were supposed to be helping me with. Ben let out a short, bitter laugh. The fire, Julian, you lit the match. I stood on that stage and talked about your vision. And then you got up there, and in 5 minutes you burned everything to the ground. Not the company. Us. Your family. Don't you dare lecture me about my family, Julian seethed. Why not no one else has? Ben said, his voice rising. I was there when you met her, Julian. You were a different person. You cared about her opinion. You listened to her. When was the last time you asked her about the museum exhibit she was working on? Do you even know what it's about? Do you know that she's terrified of giving birth? That she's been having nightmares? Or were you too busy changing the world to notice that hers was falling apart? Every word was a punch to the gut. Julian stared at Ben, a cold, sickening realization dawning in the pit of his stomach. He didn't know. He didn't know about any of it. He had been so focused on the future he was building that he had completely neglected the life he was living. Ari's voice cut through the tense silence. We found her. Every head in the room snapped towards him. She paid for a room at the Greenwich Hotel just after midnight. Used a credit card under her maiden name, Hayes, a card that's not linked to any of your joint accounts. Relief warred with fury in Julian's chest. She was safe, and she had planned this. The secret credit card was proof. This was a deliberate betrayal. Get the car, Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. I'm going down there. Julian, no, Cynthia shouted. That's the worst possible thing you could do. We need a strategy, a plan. I have a plan, Julian said, grabbing a jacket. I'm going to talk to my wife. I'm going to fix this. He was the great Julian Croft. He could solve any problem, fix any code, close any deal. He could fix this. He could fix her. He stormed out, ignoring the frantic protests of his team. The scene outside the Greenwich Hotel was chaos. Someone had leaked his destination. A mob of paparazzi and reporters swarmed the entrance, a pulsing, shouting mass of bodies and cameras. As Julian's Maybach pulled up, they surged forward, flashes exploding like gunfire. "Julian, is it true you kicked your pregnant wife out? Are you in love with Zara Vance? Where is Amelia?" Shielded by his security, Julian pushed through the throng, his face a grim mask. The noise was deafening, the questions like tiny daggers. He finally made it inside the hotel lobby, a sudden jarring oasis of calm. He strode to the elevator, his jaw clenched, and rode up to her floor. He found her room at the end of the hall. He stood outside the door for a moment, his anger beginning to fade, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. What if she wouldn't talk to him? What if Ben was right? He raised his hand and knocked the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet hallway. "Amelia, it's me. It's Julian. Please, we need to talk. Just open the door." He waited, his heart pounding. He could hear faint movement inside. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked. The door began to open. A wave of relief washed over him. She was going to see him. He could explain. He could apologize. He could fix it. But the person who stood in the doorway was not Amelia. It was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, an immaculate grey pantsuit, and a folder held in her hand like a weapon. Her expression was one of absolute, unshakable professional neutrality. She looked at Julian Croft not as a titan of industry, but as an obstacle. "Mr. Croft," the woman said, her voice cool and precise. "My name is Catherine Rinaldi. I am Amelia Hayes's legal counsel." She took a small step forward, blocking his view into the room. "My client will not be speaking with you today, or any day, without me present." She continued, her voice unwavering. "She has instructed me to inform you that she will be filing for divorce. All future communication regarding your wife and your unborn son will be directed to my office. We will be in touch." And with that, she gently but firmly closed the door in his face, the soft click echoing down the hallway, like the sound of a guillotine. Julian stood there, staring at the polished wood of the door, the words echoing in his ears. Divorce. Unborn son. My office. The world he thought he controlled, the situation he thought he could fix, had been taken from him completely. He had come here to demand, to explain, to win. But the game had changed. The rules were no longer his. And he had already lost. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured in stock prices or social status, but in dignity, respect, and the courage to choose yourself, even when it means walking away from everything. She was ignored, but she refused to be invisible. Her quiet act of defiance became a global roar, a testament to the fact that you can't silence a woman who has found her voice. What did you think of Julian's downfall? Was it karma or a crisis of his own making? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that will have you talking. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update on stories that matter. The winter wind bit through her threadbare coat, but Sarah Donovan barely noticed. Strolling past neon-lit windows, she couldn't ignore the relentless ache in her belly, an ache caused by hunger and the 6-month child she carried. Shivering on the sidewalk, she glanced up at a massive TV screen, blaring the nightly financial news. There, beaming under the bright studio lights, was a man she once promised to love forever. William Donovan, her husband, a multimillionaire, famous, admired, while she trembled in the cold. Her heart twisted. How had their world turned so cruel? She had nothing, and he seemed to have it all. Sarah Donovan had known hunger before, but never like this. On that frigid evening, the wind seemed to slice through layers of her clothing directly into her bones. She pulled the sides of her coat together in a desperate attempt to keep warm. Through the swirling snowflakes, she could just make out the bright, flashing monitors in Times Square. On the largest screen, a familiar face, William Donovan, appeared. His name scrolled in large letters. Tech Investor of the Year. Applause thundered behind him in the recorded clip. Brightly lit, he was addressing a hall filled with wealth power and cameras from CNN, CNBC, and local networks. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away. That face, the strong jaw, the slight smile that once reassured her everything would be all right. Now he looked polished, exuding confidence. She hadn't seen him in person for almost a year. Her chest clenched with memories of the day he walked out, arguments about money and ambition overshadowing their love. She'd tried to reason with him to support him, but each conversation ended in a new fight, culminating in the shocking decision he would succeed alone. The flickering billboard cut to a montage of images, William shaking hands with Mark Cuban at a tech conference, then introducing a pioneering piece of software in Silicon Valley. Sarah saw glimpses of glamorous parties William in a tailored tuxedo, accompanied by men and women she had never met. The talk show host concluded the segment by proclaiming, "William Donovan, America's newest business sensation." Then the screen blinked to a car commercial. Just like that, he vanished into the night. Sarah blinked back tears. There was a time William's arms had been her warm refuge, promising they'd face every storm side by side. And now, pregnant with his child, she walked alone on icy sidewalks, scrounging for a place to sleep. She was determined not to cry, but her emotions overwhelmed her as she gazed up at the ironically beautiful Christmas lights decorating the city. By all appearances, the world around her was celebrating, and she was surviving. Barely. She pressed a hand against her abdomen, feeling the slightest kick. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to the life inside her. It was a promise she intended to keep, though at that moment she wasn't sure how. When she turned away from the screen and stumbled onward, her foot snagged on a piece of broken pavement. A stinging pain shot through her ankle, and she nearly collapsed. She bit down a cry, scanning the crowd for help, but passers-by, preoccupied with their own rush of errands and holiday shopping, scarcely gave her a glance. That's what life had become after she left the small studio in which she and William once lived, alone, invisible. Sarah's pride was bruised, but she refused to crumble. She passed by a bakery. Through the window, the smell of fresh bread made her stomach twist. She had to preserve her last dollar for the cheapest motel, a place with peeling wallpaper and barely functioning plumbing, but at least it was indoors. She stepped inside, bought a small roll and devoured it in 3 bites. Outside again, the wind roared, intensifying the city's clamor. Still clutching her abdomen, she decided that tomorrow everything had to change. She would find a job. She'd scour the city for help. She would not let her child enter this world with nothing but sorrow. But for tonight, she needed a place to rest, a place that wasn't some abandoned corner or shadowed alley. Even if it cost her last few dollars, she had to prioritize the safety of the life inside her. As Sarah walked away from the mesmerizing screens of Times Square, one thought pulsed in her mind. Her husband, the man she had once loved beyond reason, was thriving. And here she was, pregnant and alone. Could the chasm between them grow any wider? Long before he was the darling of business magazines and tech summits, William Donovan was a daydreamer writing code in the corner of the local university library. Sarah remembered the first time she saw him. It was her sophomore year, and she was majoring in English literature at Columbia. The library's back table had been her favorite spot, quiet, perfect for reading. She noticed him, a junior in computer science, leaning over a laptop with an exasperated scowl. Curious and drawn by the intellectual frenzy in his eyes, she'd asked, "Need any help?" Although Sarah barely understood advanced programming, the question sparked the first real conversation they ever had. William's exhausted face broke into the shyest of smiles, and she recalled thinking, "He's kind of cute under all that stress." They chatted about his class project, an algorithm for data compression. Sarah confessed she was more comfortable discussing Shakespeare than software, and he teased her gently. From that moment on, they were a constant presence in each other's lives. Their connection seemed effortless. He awakened her interest in technology's potential. She introduced him to literary classics, weaving in metaphors about love and ambition. They started dating by Christmas break of that year, with sweet, simple moments, late-night walks around campus, scrounging for cheap coffee in the student lounge, trying out new ramen spots around Manhattan. They were two dreamers, William longing to found a tech startup that would revolutionize how people shared data, and Sarah hoping to become a novelist. The future seemed limitless. She could still feel the way he used to grasp her hand whenever she doubted herself, as if to say, "We'll get through anything." Yet as graduation approached, financial stresses haunted them. William, determined to compete in the tech world, pitched his software to small investors, but faced constant rejection. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to get traction for her short stories, or even land a decent internship. Their families offered little financial support. William's parents, proud owners of a modest real estate business in upstate New York, expected him to follow a more traditional path and often expressed skepticism toward his entrepreneurial obsession. Sarah's mother, whose chronic illness drained the family's savings, couldn't help beyond a few encouraging phone calls. When they got married in a humble civil ceremony right after graduation, they were brimming with hope. Their honeymoon was a short weekend, spent in a budget motel near Niagara Falls, the only getaway they could afford. But they didn't care. What mattered was their shared devotion. They returned to New York City, renting a cheap studio apartment in Queens. William coded into the late hours, while Sarah worked as a barista by day and scribbled short stories by night. Their love burned like a bright flame until cracks began to form. William became consumed with success, obsessed, really. Each failed pitch to an investor sent him into a silent downward spiral that led to outbursts. Sarah tried to reassure him that failure was part of the journey, but her optimism only irritated him. As months dragged on, the bills piled up. William grew desperate, dabbling in risky deals with shady angel investors. They had endless arguments about money. When success finally arrived nearly 2 years into their marriage, with a major investor, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, buying into William's new software idea, Sarah hoped that would ease the tension. But ironically, it only magnified their differences. William was suddenly thrust into corporate meetings, traveling across the country, networking with high-profile entrepreneurs. Invitations to flashy events replaced their quiet dinners. He no longer came home with cheap takeout. He was gone most nights, presumably in boardrooms or at fancy parties. Sarah felt him slipping away. A year passed in that swirl of success, and Sarah was left behind, often alone, in their now upscale condo near Central Park. William's time was devoured by business calls and conferences on the West Coast. When he was home, he was distracted, fidgety, unwilling to share stories of his day. She remembered their final argument vividly. She'd asked him to spend one evening with her to reconnect. He retorted that she had no clue how hard he worked to keep them afloat, how she should be more grateful. That night ended with William storming out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. He never came back. Days became weeks. Sarah's calls and texts went unanswered. Soon bank notices arrived explaining how William had switched all joint accounts to his name alone. Sarah had no income. Worse yet, 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. Fear overrode any bitterness, but desperation set in. Rent soared, her barista job didn't pay enough, and she could no longer afford the condo. Before long, she was forced onto the street. She tried contacting William's PR office, but the line always went to a polite assistant who left her on hold until she hung up in frustration. Now, witnessing his face on the giant screen in Times Square, that entire whirlwind of a past threatened to engulf her. She reminded herself of one vow she'd made, standing in that battered apartment with an eviction notice in hand. I will survive and protect this child. If the father refused to care, she would find a way. She would not become just another nameless tragedy in the city's underbelly. Morning brought little relief from the cold. Sarah woke on a narrow, squeaky bed in the cheapest motel she could find. The heater rattled uselessly, barely keeping the air above freezing. She had about $15 left, enough for a couple of cheap sandwiches, maybe bus fare if she wanted to head to the next shelter. But Sarah was stubborn. She believed there had to be something better. She packed her meager belongings, a change of clothes, her worn copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, a phone with a cracked screen that almost never picked up a signal. Everything fit into a single bag. Every step outside felt like walking through a wind tunnel. She knew she had to find help soon. A pregnant woman living on the streets was a tragedy waiting to happen. She headed to the nearest public library, an older building with classical columns, seeking warmth and free internet to look for job openings. Inside, near the community bulletin board, she found a flyer advertising a free women's shelter in Brooklyn. It promised hot meals counseling and prenatal support. She tore off the address tab. This might be my best chance, she thought, shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in days. She hopped on a bus, ignoring the pitying looks from a couple of other passengers. Upon arrival, she found the shelter nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The building was large, with peeling paint and sagging steps, but the warmth she felt when she walked inside was immediate and comforting. A friendly volunteer named Rebecca greeted her with a kind smile. After scribbling her name on a form, Sarah was shown to a cramped but clean room shared with 3 other women. Each cot had fresh blankets and a small side table. Meals are served at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening, Rebecca explained. We also have prenatal checkups every Friday with a visiting nurse from Bellevue Hospital. Sarah nearly cried with relief. A medical checkup was a blessing. She hadn't seen a doctor since learning of her pregnancy. Rebecca chatted with her for a while, asking about her situation. Though Sarah felt hesitant to reveal too much, there was something about Rebecca's gentle nature that encouraged honesty. She admitted her husband had left, that he was well off, and that she had nowhere else to go. Rebecca listened, never judging, then simply patted Sarah's shoulder. You'll be safe here. You'll get back on your feet. "I'm here if you need anything," Rebecca offered. Those words of encouragement did more for Sarah's spirit than anything had in months. That first night in the shelter, Sarah lay in the dark, hearing the muffled snores of her roommates. She felt a faint flutter within her baby moving. "I'm not alone," she reminded herself. This life inside her gave her purpose. She recalled an old Emily Dickinson line. She loved something about hope being a thing with feathers. That hope had perched in her soul, refusing to abandon her even in life's darkest corners. The next morning she joined the breakfast queue. The food wasn't luxurious oatmeal, a banana-powdered orange juice, but it was warm and nourishing. Some of the residents eyed her suspiciously. They were all at different points in life's struggles, yet in their gazes, Sarah sensed a silent camaraderie that had been missing in her life for so long. As she sat down to eat, Rebecca joined her. "We have a job support program," Rebecca said, her voice quiet. "You'd get help writing a resume, searching for openings, maybe training. I know it can be tough to find something with no stable address, but we can try." Sarah nodded eagerly. "That would be great," she replied, swallowing a surge of gratitude. She was ready to do anything office cleaning retail, anything that would help her earn enough for a deposit on a small apartment. But as she scrolled through job listings later that day, a rerun of a business show played on the shelter's TV in the lounge. They were discussing William Donovan again. A celebrity investor, Mark Cuban, had praised William's entrepreneurial drive, suggesting he was the future of American tech. Hearing the news anchor casually mention her husband's name felt like a punch to the gut. He was more successful than she'd even imagined. She took a deep breath, forced herself to look away from the screen and told herself, "This is my life now, and I'm not giving up." She wasn't sure if she hated him, missed him, or simply wished none of this had happened. All she knew was that she had to survive. And she would on her own terms. At precisely 9 in the morning the following Friday, Sarah waited in a makeshift exam room set up in the shelter's converted rec hall. Worn curtains partitioned the space. The volunteer nurse, Ms. Francis, bustled in, setting down a bag of medical supplies. She was a short, no-nonsense woman with bright, reassuring eyes. "How are you feeling, dear?" Ms. Francis asked, washing her hands and snapping on latex gloves. Sarah hesitated. She had been ignoring the dull ache in her lower back, the bouts of nausea that still came and went, and the constant exhaustion. "Better now that I have a safe place to sleep," she admitted. Ms. Francis nodded, taking Sarah's vitals, measuring her belly, and listening carefully with a Doppler for the baby's heartbeat. The rhythmic whoosh-whoosh filled the air, and Sarah's eyes grew misty. This was the first time she'd heard her child's heartbeat. So strong, she thought, pressing a hand to her mouth. "No major concerns right now?" Ms. Francis informed, giving a small smile. "But you need to be mindful of your diet. Get as much protein and healthy foods as you can. And rest. Stress can harm the baby too." Sarah almost laughed bitterly. Stress was the only thing she had in abundance. But she forced a bright nod. Ms. Francis noted that Sarah would need a formal medical file at a hospital soon in case of early labor or complications. "We'll coordinate that," Ms. Francis added. "In the meantime, do you have any support person for prenatal care? A family member or—" her voice trailed. "My husband's not around," Sarah said, swallowing a lump in her throat. "No other family in the city." The nurse's expression turned sympathetic. "Well, you're not alone. We're here to help." After the checkup, Sarah felt slightly more confident. The baby was healthy. That knowledge was the anchor she clung to. She spent her afternoons in the job support program, brushing up her typing skills, practicing interview responses with a counselor named Janet. Her English degree helped. She applied for positions as a receptionist, an editorial assistant, or even a part-time tutor. Most responses came back negative. Employers didn't want someone with an unstable address, or they required advanced certifications. But Sarah persevered. Days turned into weeks. The bulge in her belly became more pronounced, and so did the heaviness in her heart. She tried to keep track of the outside world, scanning newspapers in the library for job ads, occasionally glimpsing headlines about William Donovan's skyrocketing success. One day the paper featured a photograph of him leaving a high-end restaurant with a tall, elegant woman wearing designer clothes. The photo caption labeled her as Madeline Ashford, potential new business partner. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at her own reflection in the library window, rumpled coat eyes ringed with fatigue. If William had moved on personally, was she even a memory? That evening her back pains grew sharper, and she realized with dread that her pregnancy was entering a stage where she would soon need consistent medical care. She couldn't keep skipping checkups or rely solely on the shelter nurse. She also worried about finances, diapers, baby clothes, a crib. Where would she get them? She'd joined a waiting list for government assistance, but bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. Sarah found herself weeping some nights, the future an ominous shadow. Yet each morning she recalled the baby's heartbeat, reminding herself there was no choice but forward. One particularly cold day, she forced herself to walk 3 miles in the slushy streets to follow up on a potential receptionist position. She arrived soaked and shivering. Her hopes rose when the manager, a kindly older woman, offered a temporary role answering phones at a small publishing company. The pay was minimal, but it was something. She'd start Monday. Sarah left the office hugging a folder of paperwork and feeling a glimmer of pride. I'm making progress. When she returned to the shelter, though, she found Rebecca pale-faced in the hallway. We need to talk, Rebecca said quietly, leading Sarah to a corner. Apparently an acquaintance of Sarah's had come by looking for her, a man with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit. He left a business card that read, Donovan Enterprises. Sarah's heart hammered. She stared at the card, the swirling black and gold letters. Did he say anything she managed to ask? Just that he needed to speak with you regarding a personal matter. Sarah's mind whirled. Could it be William's lawyer? One of his personal aides? Did William know she was pregnant? She never thought he would actually search for her. A swirl of anger, fear, and a strange residual hope filled her. She resolved to call the number. Maybe it was finally time for a confrontation, a reckoning. She just didn't know what to expect. Sarah picked up a battered pay-as-you-go phone, a small victory from the shelter's resource program, and stared at the business card. It bore a name, Charles Whitmore, Legal Counsel. She dialed with trembling fingers, listening to the ring on the other end. Anxiety swelled. Finally, a crisp male voice answered. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Sarah Donovan. You left your card at the shelter. Her voice sounded small. He cleared his throat. Ah, Mrs. Donovan. I'm glad you reached out. Mr. Donovan, your husband would like to set up a meeting. It's in regard to finances and certain changes to his estate. A chill ran down her spine. Was this about a divorce? She almost panicked at the thought, but she maintained composure. Why now? She asked. The question came out bitterly. Ma'am, I only have instructions to coordinate your meeting. Could you come by the Donovan Enterprises office downtown on 5th Avenue? Sarah hesitated. Can't. Not immediately. She had a job orientation. Soon she had no decent clothes and no money for a taxi. Shall we say, next Tuesday at noon, he pressed. We'd be happy to reimburse your transportation. Mr. Donovan understands how difficult the city can be. He specifically requested you meet in a neutral setting. Sarah's anger flared at the paternalistic tone. But caution prevailed. All right. Tuesday. She hung up, heart thudding. William wants to meet. Part of her raged that he would drag her into some legal affair after all this time. Another part, small yet insistent, felt relief that maybe he would acknowledge their baby. Maybe do the right thing. And at least provide child support. Tuesday came quickly, and Sarah found herself rummaging through the shelter's donated clothing closet, picking out a modest black dress and a coat that fit snugly over her belly. Rebecca offered to do her hair in a simple bun. As she left, 6 women in the shelter wished her luck, though they knew only that she was meeting her ex. The Donovan Enterprises office towered over 5th Avenue with mirrored glass windows. Sarah approached it anxiously, ignoring the doorman's raised eyebrow when she walked in. The marble-floored lobby gleamed, and well-dressed professionals hurried past, exuding an air of wealth. A statue of William's trademark D logo was on display near the elevators, a testament to his success. Charles Whitmore, a tall, slim man with graying hair, emerged from behind the reception area and greeted her with a polite bow. Mrs. Donovan. Right this way, he said, leading her to a plush conference room overlooking the city skyline. Soft leather chairs, a polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park. Everything screamed opulence. She perched on a chair, feeling out of place. Moments later, the door opened. In walked William Donovan. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and stepped forward with a hesitant smile. Sarah's throat constricted at the sight of him. He looked the same, yet different, older, more confident. She stood instinctively, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. If he noticed her rounded belly, he didn't show any immediate reaction. Sarah, he said quietly, as though testing the word. He paused, his eyes flicking to her stomach, then back to her face. Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were, are you? She inhaled sharply. Pregnant, she finished. Yes. For nearly 6 months. A fleeting expression of shock, maybe guilt, flashed in his eyes. I didn't know, he said. You didn't tell me. Anger boiled in her. I tried. You cut all contact. You walked out. And... Her voice trembled. She clenched her fists. You were too busy with your empire to pick up the phone. He exhaled, looking pained. I'm sorry. I truly am. He sank into the chair opposite her, rubbing his temples. I messed up. I realize that now. I've been going through a lot, but it's no excuse. She eyed him warily, uncertain if this was genuine remorse or a performance. So why am I here? Did you need me to sign divorce papers? Is that it? William shook his head vigorously. No. That's not it at all. He looked at Charles, who stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Donovan asked me to assist in drafting an arrangement to provide you with financial support, enough to cover all prenatal care, childbirth expenses, and living costs. In addition, there's a trust fund he'd like to establish for the child. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief that there was some practical solution, indignation that he thought money alone could fix everything, and a flicker of hope. What about us? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Our marriage? William gazed at her eyes, clouded. I want to help you. And our child. I know I can't change the past, but I can at least do right by you now. He hesitated, swallowing hard. As for us, Sarah, I can't pretend I haven't caused terrible damage. I don't expect you to forgive me instantly. But maybe with time, she wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like they were strangers. She realized she was trembling. He's acknowledging the child, she told herself. That was step one. Charles laid out documents referencing monthly allowances coverage for medical bills, etc. The amounts were staggering. Sarah had never seen such figures. She could live comfortably, rent an apartment, and never worry about basic needs again. But guilt gnawed at her. Should she accept this? She eyed William, her voice wavering. Why now? She asked. Why not? Before William's face was taut. When I saw you disappeared from our condo and heard rumors you were struggling, I tried to locate you, but I was overwhelmed with expansions, new deals, then the pandemic of responsibilities. I kept putting it off. He inhaled, pained. That was wrong. I realized I couldn't move forward, knowing you might be suffering. You deserved better. Damn right I did, Sarah muttered, tears burning her eyes. She glanced at the legal documents. They were a band-aid solution. Maybe it was an answer for the baby. Yet a single question lingered. Could William Donovan possibly be part of my life again? She didn't sign anything that day, telling Charles she needed time to think. William offered to call her a car, but she declined, wanting to walk back to the shelter to clear her head. He handed her a card with his personal cell number, the only item that felt remotely intimate. She left the grand building uncertain whether she was stepping toward salvation or heartbreak. That evening, Sarah returned to the shelter in a daze. She found Rebecca in the kitchen, dishing out bowls of soup to the residents. Feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her, Sarah pulled Rebecca aside and recounted the surreal encounter with William Donovan. She showed her the paperwork, baffling sums of money that could turn her life around. That's... Wow, Rebecca breathed, flipping through the pages. I've never seen so many zeros on a support agreement. She paused. So what are you going to do? Sarah sighed, sinking into a chair. I don't know. Part of me feels like taking this money is the only logical choice. The baby deserves a stable life, not a mother stuck in a shelter. But another part, she rubbed her belly. I'm scared he's just trying to buy off his conscience. If I sign, do I lose my dignity? Rebecca placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. It's not about dignity, Sarah. It's about providing for your child and yourself. You've sacrificed so much. You deserve some security. That doesn't mean you have to let him back in your life unless you want to. Those words calmed Sarah slightly, but her mind remained unsettled. She recalled her once blazing love with William, how they'd giggle over cheap pizza late at night, how she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder while he read his code aloud. Is that man still in there, beneath the polished millionaire facade, she wondered. A part of her yearned for closure or even a chance at reconciliation. But the hurt was fresh, the betrayal still raw. The baby's well-being, however, was paramount. That same night, she carefully reviewed the documents, scribbling notes and questions in the margins, wanting to ensure she wasn't signing away any rights inadvertently. If William was sincere in his remorse, maybe she could start by accepting financial support, then see if anything else could be salvaged later. She set the papers aside, resolved to meet with Charles again in a few days. Meanwhile, Sarah's new part-time receptionist job started. She commuted by bus, then hopped the subway to a modest building in Midtown, stepping into the small publishing house. The environment was busy, yet casual stacks of manuscripts, coffee mugs on every desk, editors arguing about grammar. On her first day, she answered phones, directed visitors, and fetched coffee for staff meetings. By lunchtime, she was exhausted, but a gentle wave of triumph swelled inside her. "I'm working. I'm making strides." During a brief break, she scrolled her phone and saw a new message from William. "Please let me know if you have any questions about the agreement. Also, I hope you're doing well." That was all. So formal, yet tinged with a cautious warmth. Sarah stared at the screen, unsure how to reply, eventually typing a short, "I'm still thinking. I'm safe. Thanks." She pressed send. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to focus on her tasks. Over the following week, she gradually came to a decision. She agreed to sign the financial support arrangement, but made it clear to Charles Whitmore in an email that she didn't want William controlling her life. She insisted on having her own apartment in her own name, a modest but comfortable place near the shelter, so she could remain in the supportive environment until she felt truly stable. She also wanted the freedom to make medical and personal decisions for the baby. If William truly wanted to be involved, they could discuss visitation and co-parenting later. To her astonishment, William agreed to all of it, no arguments. He forwarded a preliminary lease for a small 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, the rent fully paid for a year. Sarah felt a surge of relief. He's taking responsibility, she thought. Maybe there was a shred of the old William left. But was she ready for more than just a transactional arrangement? Late one night, cradling the phone, she impulsively dialed his personal number. He picked up immediately, sounding anxious. "Sarah." She swallowed. "I just wanted to say thank you," she managed, "for the help." Silence filled the line, then a soft exhale. "Of course. It's the least I can do." Her voice trembled. "This baby, William, it's ours. He or she deserves 2 parents who at least respect each other." He murmured, "I'd like that. I'd like to earn your respect again. And maybe one day, your forgiveness." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She remembered how once, years ago, they could share entire nights, simply talking, dreaming. She had so many questions for him: why he abandoned her, what truly motivated his success, whether there was any love left. But for now, she whispered, "Good night, William," and ended the call. By the time Sarah was entering her 7th month of pregnancy, her life looked drastically different. With William's financial support, she moved into the small but cozy apartment. The walls were painted a cheerful cream color, and there was an extra room she planned to turn into a nursery. The furniture was minimal, just a sofa, a bed, and a kitchen table. But it was hers. Her name was on the lease. Her job at the publishing house had also become slightly more secure. The manager recognized her punctuality and diligence. They offered her an extended contract for another 3 months. With the baby coming, Sarah wasn't sure how long she could keep working, but at least she had some sense of purpose each day. She'd found a routine that made her feel human again. Wake up, check on emails, go to work, come home. Set aside half an hour to jot down story ideas and then rest. She still visited the shelter occasionally, volunteering to help with new arrivals, offering them a spark of hope in the same way Rebecca had done for her. One chilly afternoon, Sarah heard a knock on her apartment door. She opened it, to find William standing there, holding a small bouquet of lilies and a bag of groceries. Her heart pounded as she took in his hesitant smile. "I was in the neighborhood," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't told him her exact address, Charles must have. She had been careful with boundaries, not wanting to feel controlled, but she found herself nodding, stepping aside to let him in. He handed her the flowers, which she placed in a vase on the kitchen table. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the grocery bag. "Fresh fruit, vitamins, and a new jacket for you. The weather's getting colder." The gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she managed, smoothing her hand over her growing belly. His eyes flicked to the apartment, taking in the bare walls and modest furnishings. "It's nice, cozy," he remarked, trying to fill the silence. He glanced at her abdomen again, then back at her face. "May I ask, do you know the baby's gender?" She shook her head. "I want it to be a surprise," she said softly. "That's wonderful." William looked down, fiddling with the bag. Finally, he exhaled. "Sarah, I know showing up like this might be too forward. I'm trying to respect your space, but I'd also like to be more involved. I want to help with the doctor appointments, the nursery, anything you need." She studied him, noticing a sincerity in his gaze that hadn't been there during their last tumultuous months together. Why the sudden change, she asked. She recalled the humiliating nights she spent on the streets, clinging to her coat for warmth, while he mingled with venture capitalists. William's shoulders sagged. "When I left, I was consumed by my ambition, believing I couldn't handle a relationship. I was terrified of failing. I did fail you in the worst way. Then once success arrived, I felt emptier than ever. All I had was money, status, and a hollow sense of accomplishment." He paused, voice raw. "I realize now that none of it matters, without love, without people who truly care about you. I guess I'm trying to atone for that. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here now." Tears prickled Sarah's eyes. The sincerity in his voice shook her. "I appreciate the honesty," she said slowly. She wondered if it was real or if guilt simply propelled him now that she was visibly pregnant and vulnerable. Yet a part of her, the part that remembered how they'd once dreamed side by side, wanted to believe him. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, gesturing to the kettle on the stove. He nodded gratefully. The two of them settled at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea amidst the silence. The city traffic hummed outside. Neither knew how to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage in one afternoon, but at least they were there, trying. After a while, William cleared his throat. "I'd like to take you to your next prenatal appointment," he said. "If you'll let me. I can drive or we can get a car. Whatever you prefer." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be nice." Deep down, a small flicker of warmth lit her heart, something akin to hope. William accompanied Sarah to her next prenatal appointment at Bellevue Hospital. Ms. Francis, the shelter nurse who volunteered there, greeted them warmly, but Sarah noticed the curious glances from staff members. She imagined they recognized William. His face was plastered across business headlines. Yet to his credit, he didn't flaunt his status. He simply held Sarah's coat while she changed into a gown and asked the doctor thoughtful questions about the baby's development. They heard the baby's heartbeat again, steady and reassuring. William's expression softened, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. A powerful wave of emotion struck her. It was the first tangible moment she realized he truly cared about the child. On their way out, he placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her through the bustling hallway. She allowed the small gesture longing for closeness, yet keeping her guard up. In the hospital lobby, they unexpectedly bumped into a familiar face, Barbara Donovan Williams' mother. Her short silver hair was styled elegantly, and she wore a designer coat. She froze upon spotting her son with Sarah. "William," she exclaimed. Then her gaze flicked to Sarah's round belly, and her eyes narrowed. "I heard rumors, but I thought you two were done." Sarah instinctively braced herself. She recalled the tension with her mother-in-law, who never quite warmed to her. Barbara had always found subtle ways to criticize Sarah's family background and modest means. She also blamed Sarah for distracting William from more important ambitions. William squared his shoulders. "Mother, this is Sarah. My wife. She's pregnant with our child." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're reconciling?" she asked, voice laced with disapproval. Sarah couldn't hold back. "I wouldn't call it that," she said quietly. "We're trying to figure things out, at least for the baby's sake." Barbara sniffed disdainfully. "William, you have far too many responsibilities to let old mistakes drag you down." She eyed Sarah as if she were an intruder. "Why didn't you tell him you were pregnant sooner?" A flame of anger rose in Sarah. "I tried. He left, and I had no way to reach him. And trust me, I wouldn't call carrying your grandchild a mistake." William gently took his mother's arm. "Enough, Mother. The baby is my responsibility, and I won't have you speak to Sarah that way. We're not discussing this here in a hospital lobby." Barbara sniffed again. "We'll talk later, William." She glared at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt, then turned on her heel and walked away. Heart-pounding, Sarah noticed people staring. She blinked back tears, humiliated by the confrontation. William's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry. She had no right to talk to you like that," he said softly. But Sarah's mind raced. She recalled how Barbara had once told her she wasn't good enough for William, that he needed a partner more on his level. Now wealthy and successful, William's family clearly saw Sarah as an obstacle. "It's fine," she muttered, though her trembling hands said otherwise. "I'll manage." They walked outside, the crisp air hitting their faces. William turned to her. "Please don't let her get to you. She doesn't speak for me." Sarah found her resolve. "I won't. But if we're going to co-parent, I need to know you'll stand by me, not be swayed by your mother's opinions." He nodded, eyes earnest. "I promise." Though his promise felt genuine, Sarah couldn't ignore the chill left by the confrontation. She remembered the nights when William's mother belittled her for dreaming of being a writer, for lacking financial security. Would that negativity poison their child's life too? Or had William grown enough to shield his new family from it? Only time would tell. On the drive back to Sarah's apartment, the tension was palpable. William tried to make small talk about the baby's due date, about nursery decor, but Sarah was lost in her thoughts. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admitted quietly, "My mother was always controlling. Part of why I left was because I felt suffocated by her expectations, by the pressure of success. I let that overshadow you and me. I'm sorry." Sarah clutched her seatbelt. "What's done is done," she said, voice steady. "Let's just focus on the future, on doing right by this baby. That's all that matters." Inside, though, her emotions churned. Could we really have a future together, she wondered? Or is it just going to be co-parenting with a man I once loved? At her apartment, he walked her to the door. "Call me if you need anything," he said softly. She nodded, uncertain if she'd ever be ready to let him fully back into her life. The final weeks of Sarah's pregnancy arrived with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Her belly felt enormous, every movement an effort. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a blend of excitement and anxiety about the impending birth. William visited regularly, bringing supplies, maternity clothes, organic food, baby items. They spoke about practicalities, pediatricians, childcare options, possible names. Yet the question of their relationship remained unresolved. At times, they fell into an unexpected closeness, sharing a laugh at a tiny onesie with silly prints reminiscing about their college days. In those moments, Sarah glimpsed the man she fell in love with, his eyes warm and tender. But the memory of abandonment always lurked. She couldn't easily forget sleeping on sidewalks, shivering in the winter cold, all while he soared to stardom. Trust would not be rebuilt overnight. One evening she typed away at a short story, her old passion for writing rekindling, when a gentle knock came at the door. She opened it to find William in casual clothes holding a large container of homemade soup. "You mentioned in passing that you craved chicken soup," he said, smiling sheepishly. "I asked my personal chef to make a batch." "Don't worry, I didn't cook it myself. That would be disastrous." Sarah's laughter slipped out before she could stop it. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He set the container down, noticing her manuscript drafts scattered across the table. "Are you writing again?" She blushed, nodding. "Just trying to get the creative juices flowing. Something for me, you know, to find myself again." He asked if he could read a snippet. She hesitated, then allowed him. He read quietly, eyes darting across the page. When he finished, he looked up, an admiring expression on his face. "This is really good," he said softly. "I forgot how talented you are." She swallowed, her heart fluttering. He was praising her, not dismissing her efforts as frivolous, like he once had. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked about the story about a lone traveler who finds hope in unexpected places. The conversation flowed naturally, reminiscent of their younger selves. At one point, he gently placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. A shared smile passed between them, something both tender and uncertain. Later that night, as he left, she lingered at the door. "William," she said softly, "I just want you to know. I see you trying. I appreciate it." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "I'll keep trying, Sarah." But the next day, chaos returned. William called her in a panic, asking her to watch the news. Another business scandal had broken out, accusations that Donovan Enterprises engaged in questionable stock trading. Rumors swirled that William's mother, Barbara, had been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating backdoor deals. William's name was splashed across headlines with tabloids, speculating about the moral integrity of his entire operation. Sarah flipped on her old TV set, seeing reporters swarm in front of Donovan Enterprises. A few sensationalist channels displayed a picture of Sarah from months ago, claiming she was the estranged wife carrying the heir to a troubled empire. She felt nauseous. Was she about to be dragged into the public eye? William texted, "I'm sorry. This is out of control. I never wanted you to be involved." She fought the urge to panic, but the stress weighed heavily, and within hours, mild contractions started. She was only 36 weeks along, a bit early, but still within a safe range. The contractions weren't severe yet, but she felt them enough to know her body might be preparing for labor. She called Miss Francis, who advised her to rest and hydrate, warning her to come to the hospital if things intensified. Night descended, and the tabloids kept spewing stories. A photo of Barbara, stern-faced, refused to speak to reporters. They insinuated that William's entire fortune could be at risk. Sarah tried not to care about money, but she worried about the baby. If Donovan Enterprises collapsed under scandal, would her child be caught in the crossfire of a messy public fiasco? When William arrived at her apartment, he looked drained, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry for the media circus," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea my mother was involved in shady trades. I've fired the people responsible, but the damage is done." Sarah tried to remain calm, but the Braxton Hicks contractions flared, causing her to wince. William noticed immediately fear flashing across his features. "Are you okay?" "I think—" She paused, breathing through the discomfort. "I might be in early labor." His face paled, and in that moment, all talk of scandal and business melted away. "Let's get you to the hospital," he said gently, helping her gather her things. As they hurried out, Sarah realized a new chapter was beginning. Whatever storms raged outside, she was about to bring a child into the world, and she needed William's unwavering support. Inside the maternity wing at Bellevue Hospital, time seemed to slip into a blur of fluorescent lights, medical chatter, and waves of pain. Sarah was admitted with mild contractions that by midnight turned fierce. William stayed by her side, gripping her hand through each surge. Sweating and trembling, Sarah alternated between tears and focused breathing, clinging to the promise that soon she'd hold her baby. It was a tumultuous night. At one point, the baby's heart rate dipped slightly, prompting quick action from the medical staff. Fear stabbed through Sarah. She locked eyes with William, seeing raw terror reflected there. In that moment, all bitterness faded, replaced by the realization that they both desperately wanted their child to be safe. The baby's heartbeat stabilized, and relief flowed. Hours crawled by. Finally, near dawn, Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to push. Nurses coached her, encouraging her to bear down. She felt like every muscle in her body was on fire. William murmured supportive words, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. With a final guttural cry, she felt the release of pain and the sudden miraculous wail of new life. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming newborn. A rush of emotions seized Sarah. Love, relief, awe. She reached out trembling arms as they placed the baby on her chest. Shocked by the warmth of that tiny body, tears streamed down Sarah's face. William's eyes glistened too, a rare vulnerability she'd never seen in him before. "Welcome to the world," Sarah whispered, voice choked, pressing a kiss to the baby's wet forehead. The little girl quieted, opening her eyes for a brief second, as if trying to focus on her mother's face. Later they moved Sarah to a recovery room. William remained close, pacing the hallway, on calls to his legal team, but always returning to check on Sarah and the baby. He smiled whenever he saw them together, as though the world outside, with all its scandal and drama, had lost its power here. Barbara tried to visit, but Sarah requested only William and the medical staff be allowed in. She wasn't ready to confront her mother-in-law. Not yet. Meanwhile, word arrived that the scandal at Donovan Enterprises was being resolved. William had stepped forward, taking responsibility for corporate oversight lapses and cooperating with regulators. He was determined to repair the damage rather than hide. 2 days passed in the hospital, a whirlwind of feeding diaper changes and exhausted naps. Sarah watched William hold their daughter, marveling at how gently he cradled her. They hadn't formally picked a name. Sarah had 6 favorites. While gazing into her daughter's round, curious eyes, she decided on hope. It felt fitting. This tiny baby was the embodiment of new beginnings. When discharge day came, William insisted on driving them to Sarah's apartment. He carefully carried the car seat, setting it up by the living room couch. Sarah gently unbuckled Hope, lifting her close. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet apartment, the hush broken only by soft baby sighs. "I want to make a pledge," William said, voice low. "To be here for you and Hope, always. I know I can't erase the past, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make our future better." Sarah gazed at him, then at Hope. Her heart brimmed with a kaleidoscope of emotions: uncertainty, gratitude, a cautious desire to heal. "It won't be easy," she murmured. "We have a lot to work through, but I'd like to try." He exhaled relief, flooding his features. "We'll go at your pace. Whatever you need." She nodded, tears glimmering. Over his shoulder, she saw a reflection in the window herself, William and Hope in his arms, forming a fragile family portrait. Perhaps fate had brought them full circle. The child they created now bound them with a love that neither betrayal nor success could sever. For weeks they navigated those uncharted waters. William balanced corporate responsibilities with fatherhood, often losing track of time as he admired his sleeping daughter. Sarah slowly let her guard down, recognizing that while forgiveness would be a journey, she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. Each day, she felt stronger. Each day, baby Hope grew a reminder that life could emerge triumphant, even from heartbreak. Whether or not Sarah and William's relationship would fully mend remained to be seen. But for the first time, she believed in second chances. In a world as unpredictable as theirs, one truth shone clear: love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. And so, from the frigid sidewalks of homelessness to the gentle warmth of a newfound family, Sarah and William's story shows that life rarely unfolds as expected, but hope can spark miracles. Their journey reminds us that every hardship carries the seed of possibility, and every broken bond can mend with genuine remorse, forgiveness, and perseverance. Thank you for joining me in this emotional roller coaster of heartache, redemption, and rebirth. If this story moved you, if you felt Sarah's struggles and found inspiration in her resilience, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support ensures we can continue creating dramatic, heartfelt stories that spark conversations and spread hope. Comment below. What part of Sarah and William's journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. Together we celebrate love's power to heal, no matter how broken the path once seemed.